The road was empty. Just the occasional howl of the wind sweeping through the towering pines and the rhythmic hum of tires rolling over smooth asphalt. Officer Dallin kept his hands firm on the wheel of his patrol car, eyes scanning the quiet highway. Night shifts in this part of the state were uneventful, usually just speeding tickets and the odd stranded traveler. Then, the headlights caught movement. A bear. No, a whole family of bears. Dallin let out a small whistle. A mother bear and 3 cubs, cautiously stepping onto the road. The mother stopped abruptly, sniffing the air, then pushed her little ones forward with a gentle nudge. The cubs wobbled on unsure legs, glancing at the large human-made path before them. Dallin instinctively slowed the car to a full stop. He turned on his hazard lights, illuminating the scene in flashing red and blue, and reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Dallin. I've got a mother bear and 3 cubs crossing Highway 14 near mile marker." His voice trailed off. Something felt wrong. The air was too still. The wind had stopped. Even the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves had vanished. Dallin frowned, stepping out of the vehicle. His boots crunched softly against the gravel shoulder as he flicked on his body cam. He didn't know why, but something in his gut told him to record this. The mother bear suddenly froze. Her head snapped up, ears twitching, eyes locked on something ahead. The cubs huddled close to her legs. Then, out of nowhere, the air shifted. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't movement. It was like the fabric of reality itself had been gently pulled, stretched like rippling water. And then, it appeared. A tall, shadowy figure materialized in the middle of the road. Dallin's breath caught in his throat. His hand hovered over his holster, but some deep, instinctive part of him screamed, "Don't." The figure wasn't human. It wasn't even solid. Its shape flickered, like a projection struggling to maintain form. It had glowing eyes, not menacing, not cruel, just watchful. The bears saw it too. But instead of running, instead of reacting like terrified animals, they bowed their heads. Like they recognized it. Dallin's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The streetlights above flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows. His radio let out a burst of static. Then, just as suddenly, the thing turned its head toward him. A low hum filled the air. Not sound exactly, but a vibration in the chest, a pressure behind the eyes. The world seemed to bend slightly, like gravity had just been rewritten. And then, darkness. His body cam glitched. The streetlights burst in a shower of sparks. The highway cameras froze, their feeds scrambled. Then, in the blink of an eye, the figure was gone. The mother bear nudged her cubs again. As if nothing had happened. As if the world hadn't just broken for a split second. Dallin stood frozen, staring at his body cam's small screen. The recording had cut out, except for one single frame. He zoomed in. The blurry outline of the figure remained, its glowing eyes piercing through the distortion. But just beneath it, faintly visible in the corrupted data, was something that sent chills through his bones. A symbol. One he had never seen before. Or rather, one he couldn't remember seeing. Yet, something in him knew. Knew that whatever had just happened wasn't over. Officer Dallin sat in his patrol car, staring at the frozen frame on his body cam. The figure was unmistakable, tall, humanoid, but not quite solid. The eyes, those glowing eyes bored into him even through the grainy distortion of the footage. But it was the symbol beneath it that sent shivers up his spine. It felt familiar, yet he couldn't place it. His pulse was still racing. He looked up from the screen. The bears were gone. No sounds of their footsteps. No rustling in the underbrush. Just gone. Dallin swallowed hard. He checked the time, 2:47 a.m. He could have sworn it was just after 2 o'clock when he pulled over. Had he lost time? His radio crackled. Dallin, report. You went silent for over 30 minutes. 30 minutes? He hesitated, hand gripping the radio. He could already hear the disbelief in their voices if he told the truth. Had some tech issues. Highway's clear now. Static. Then, a curt response, copy that. Return to station for your shift report. Dallin sighed. He hit the gas, but his hands were still shaking. Back at the station, the fluorescent lights of the precinct buzzed softly as Dallin walked into the monitoring room. Rows of security screens displayed traffic footage, street cameras, and his own body cam feed, all stored automatically in the system. Sergeant Orlo was already reviewing his patrol log. A stocky man with tired eyes, Orlo rarely reacted to much. But when he saw Dallin's footage, his fingers stiffened over the keyboard. What am I looking at? He muttered. That's what I'd like to know, Dallin replied, crossing his arms. Orlo leaned closer. He zoomed in on the blurry, shadowed figure, then scrolled forward, until the corruption took over. Static. Glitches. The video freezing, then cutting out completely. Orlo sat back with a frown. Your camera cut out? That never happens. The footage just stops? Dallin nodded. And the weird part? The highway cameras also glitched out at the same time. Orlo looked up. That got his attention. Every single one? Yeah. It's like something knocked out all the electronics for miles. Orlo scratched his chin, then stood up. His reaction told Dallin one thing: this wasn't normal. Look, I need to send this up the chain. IT will take a look. Dallin studied him carefully. You ever see anything like this before? Orlo hesitated. Then, too quickly, no. He was lying. But before Dallin could press further, Orlo shut the monitor off and turned toward him. Go home, Dallin. Get some sleep. But Dallin didn't feel tired. He felt like he was being watched. The feeling of being watched Dallin drove home, but the entire way, he felt it, that unsettling, crawling sensation at the back of his neck. He checked his mirrors constantly. No cars. No headlights. Just the dark, empty highway. Yet, the feeling wouldn't leave. When he finally pulled into his driveway, the streetlights flickered. His stomach twisted into a knot. He stepped out of his car slowly, hand on his belt, not on his gun, but on his radio. He didn't know why, but the instinct felt right. Something was here. Then, his phone screen turned on by itself. A notification. He grabbed the device and unlocked it. A single new message. No sender. No number. Just 3 words. Don't look away. Dallin's breath hitched. His grip tightened on the phone. Then, his porch light blew out. He turned. Something was standing at the edge of his yard. It was watching him. Dallin's breath came in short, sharp bursts. He stood frozen on his porch, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The figure at the edge of his yard didn't move. It stood just beyond the reach of his flickering streetlight, its shape blurry, indistinct, like it wasn't fully there. Like it wasn't supposed to be there. Dallin swallowed hard. Every instinct in his body told him to go inside, lock the doors, call for backup. But he didn't move. Because deep down, he knew, this wasn't something backup could handle. The words on his phone screen burned into his mind. Don't look away. Dallin kept his eyes locked on the figure, his pulse hammering. Then, it twitched. Not a step, not a lunge, just the slightest, unnatural flicker, like a corrupted video skipping a frame. Dallin's muscles tensed. He didn't blink. The thing tilted its head. Then, it took a step forward. Dallon's breath caught in his throat. His instinct screamed run, but something told him if he turned his back now, if he looked away for even a second, he wouldn't get another chance. His mind raced. What did it want? The bears. The highway. The glitching cameras. The symbol. He suddenly remembered the body cam footage, the single frame of that unfamiliar symbol beneath the figure. And now, here it was. In his yard. Watching him. Waiting. Dallon took a slow, careful step back toward his door. The figure mirrored him. Step for step. The movement was off, delayed, like watching a marionette with tangled strings. Dallon's fingers fumbled for the doorknob. The second he touched it, the figure froze. Then, it vanished. Not like stepping into the shadows. Not like running. It just ceased to exist. Gone. Dallon stood there, heart pounding. His porch light flickered one last time, then stayed on. Silence. The air felt normal again. But the damage was done. He knew, deep in his gut, this thing wasn't finished with him. A new clue. Dallon didn't sleep. He sat on his couch, laptop open, replaying his corrupted body cam footage over and over again. The video refused to cooperate. Static, glitches, then nothing. But the single frame, the one frozen moment of clarity, still remained. That symbol. Dallon enlarged it, tracing the jagged, looping lines with his finger. It didn't look like any language he recognized. But something about it felt old. Ancient. He ran a reverse image search. No results. Frustrated, he tried again. He typed in descriptions, unknown glyphs, symbols on highway surveillance, unexplained phenomena near animal crossings. Nothing. He was about to give up when his email dinged. New message. No sender. No subject. Just a single attachment. Dallon's stomach twisted. He hesitated, then clicked. A low-resolution image filled his screen. His pulse slammed against his ribs. It was the same symbol. But this time, it wasn't from his footage. It was carved into an ancient stone tablet. And beneath the image, in small, typed text, "You are not the first. But you may be the last." Dallon stared at the message, his skin crawling. Who sent this? What did it mean? And more importantly, what was coming next? Dallon's eyes stayed locked on the email. His brain worked in overdrive, trying to process what he was looking at. The symbol, the one from his corrupted body cam footage, was right here, carved into an ancient stone tablet. But how? And who had sent this? He clicked on the sender details. No address. No traceable IP. Just nothing. His hands felt clammy as he reached for his phone. Dispatch, this is Officer Dallon. Requesting IT support for a cyber intrusion. He stopped mid-sentence. The message was gone. The email had vanished, as if it had never been there. Dallon cursed under his breath, staring at the now empty inbox. The message had left no trace, no record. Someone was watching him. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. What was he even dealing with? The highway incident. The bears bowing to the figure. The strange time loss. The unknown symbol. And now this? Dallon had seen plenty of weird things in his years on the force. But this was something else. Something bigger. And he needed answers. A mysterious caller. Dallon barely got 2 hours of restless sleep before his phone rang. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Officer Dallon, we need to talk. A man's voice. Calm. Direct. Dallin sat up instantly. Who is this? A pause. Then, someone who knows what you saw. Dallin's stomach tightened. He grabbed his notepad. Go on. The thing on your footage. The figure. It wasn't the first time it's been seen. But it's the first time it's been recorded, and survived. Dallin's grip tightened. Survived? What does that mean? The voice sighed. Every other recorded instance has been erased, one way or another. But somehow, you held on to that single frame. And that means, they made a mistake. Who is they? Another pause. Then, the man's voice dropped lower. Not everything walking on this planet was born here. Dallin felt a cold chill race down his spine. The bears, he muttered. They weren't acting normal. It was like they knew what that thing was. They did. Dallin swallowed. His head was spinning. What do you know about the symbol? He asked. For the first time, the voice hesitated. Then, finally, it's a warning. Or a marker. Either way, you've seen too much. And that means you're now part of it. Part of what? Dallin's mind reeled, but before he could press for more, click. The call ended. Dallin pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at the screen. No trace of the number. No history of the call. Just like the email, it was gone. The missing time. By the time Dallin got to the station, the unease hadn't left him. He went straight to the evidence lab, where IT was still running diagnostics on his glitched body cam footage. Anything? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The technician, a young guy named Lewis, rubbed his eyes. I've never seen anything like this, man. It's like the footage was scrambled on purpose. Dallin leaned in. By what? Lewis hesitated, then turned his monitor. A timeline of the footage. Dallin frowned. Something was wrong. Why is there a gap? He asked. Lewis sighed. That's the weird part. The footage you saw? The one with the static? That's not just random corruption. He pointed to the missing time between frames. Something cut out exactly 7 minutes and 19 seconds of footage, cleanly. There's no transition, no error, no disruption. It's like. Dallin finished for him. Like it was removed on purpose. Lewis nodded. Dallin exhaled. His mind raced. 7 minutes and 19 seconds. What had happened in that missing time? The scientist that night, Dallin sat in his car, deep in thought. He had more questions than answers. But then, another email appeared on his phone. No sender. No subject. Just an address. And a single sentence, if you want the truth, come alone. Dallin hesitated. He knew better than to walk into traps. But something in his gut told him, this was real. And right now, it was his only lead. Dallin sat in his car, staring at the cryptic email. If you want the truth, come alone. His gut told him this was a bad idea. But at this point, he was too deep to turn back. Someone knew what he had seen. Someone knew what was happening to him. And he needed answers. He punched the address into his GPS. A cabin. About 40 miles outside of town, tucked away in the mountains. A secluded meeting in the middle of nowhere. Perfect. Still, he went. He drove in silence, the road stretching endlessly ahead, flanked by thick forest. The farther he went, the more uneasy he felt. Finally, his headlights illuminated an old wooden cabin. No lights, no sign of life, except for an ancient pickup truck parked out front. Dallin stepped out cautiously. The night air was too still. Then, the front door creaked open. Come in, a voice called. Dallon's grip tightened around his flashlight. Every cop instinct in his body screamed at him to turn around. But he went in anyway. The scientist's warning: the inside of the cabin was cluttered with papers, books, and strange diagrams pinned to the walls. A frail, older man sat at a desk, his face half-lit by an old desk lamp. Thick glasses. Unkempt hair. Deep bags under his eyes. He looked like a man who had spent a lifetime chasing a ghost. "You must be Officer Dallon," he said, his voice raspy. Dallon didn't sit. "You sent the email?" The man nodded. "And the photo of the symbol. I assume you recognized it." Dallon crossed his arms. "I saw it on my body cam. On the road." "But you already know that." The man's lips pressed into a thin line. "You were lucky," he muttered. Dallon frowned. "Lucky?" The scientist gestured to a stack of yellowed case files. "Do you know how many people have seen what you saw? And lived to talk about it?" Dallon didn't answer. The man leaned forward. "None." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Dallon exhaled sharply. "Then why am I still here?" The man laced his fingers together. "Because something changed. Something that's never happened before." Dallon's mind flashed back to the mother bear and her cubs. How they bowed their heads to the figure instead of running. He leaned forward. The bears. They weren't normal, were they? The scientist gave him a long, knowing look. "No, officer. They weren't." Dallon's heartbeat quickened. "Then what the hell were they?" The scientist sighed, rubbing his temples. "They weren't bears. Not completely, anyway. They were something else." Dallon stiffened. "Something sentient?" The man nodded. "Not just sentient. Older. Smarter. Hidden." Dallon felt a chill creep up his spine. Was he seriously standing here, listening to a man tell him that a family of bears weren't really bears? But deep down, he already knew. He had seen it. The way they reacted. The way they moved. The way they knew the figure on the road. They were communicating, Dallon muttered. The scientist gave a grim smile. "And you just happened to be there to witness it? A species living among us?" Dallon paced the room. "You're saying an entire species of intelligent beings has been hiding in plain sight? As animals?" "Not just any animals," the man corrected. He opened a dusty file and pulled out a photo of a bear's skeleton. But something was off about it. "What do you see?" he asked. Dallon studied the bones. At first, it looked normal. But then, his stomach twisted. The skull. It was almost a bear's skull, but not quite. The proportions were wrong. The eye sockets were deeper. The jaw structure was too defined, too precise. It looked more human. Dallon slowly set the photo down. He didn't want to believe it. "So what are they?" he asked quietly. The scientist exhaled. "I don't know their name. I don't even know how long they've been here. But they exist, Officer Dallon. And somehow, you stumbled right into their secret." Dallon's jaw clenched. "And the figure I saw? The thing on the road?" The scientist hesitated. "That." He started, rubbing his temples. "That wasn't one of them." Dallon's pulse spiked. "Then what was it?" The old man's voice dropped lower. "Something looking for them." Silence filled the room. Dallon slowly sank into a chair, trying to process what he'd just heard. An intelligent species hiding as animals. A mysterious entity hunting them. And he had accidentally exposed them. He let out a bitter laugh. "So let me guess," he muttered. "Now that I know the truth, I have a target on my back. The scientist nodded grimly. I'm afraid so, Officer Dallin. And you're running out of time. A new message. As Dallin drove home, his mind raced with everything he had learned. What was he supposed to do now? Pretend none of this had happened? Walk away? His gut told him that wasn't an option. When he pulled into his driveway, he checked his phone. One new message. No sender. No subject. Just a single line, you weren't supposed to see them. Now we see you. Dallin's blood ran cold. And just as he looked up, his porch light flickered. Then, it went out. Dallin didn't move. The porch light was out. His phone screen dimmed, the ominous message still staring back at him. You weren't supposed to see them. Now we see you. His breath came slow, controlled. He refused to let fear take over. Then, movement. Across the street, beneath the shadows of the trees, something shifted. A tall, flickering figure. Watching. Dallin's fingers hovered over his holster, but he knew, this wasn't something he could shoot. A strange, low hum filled the air. Not sound, exactly. More like a vibration inside his bones. Then, in a blink, the figure was gone. Dallin swallowed hard, his pulse hammering. He needed answers. And he knew exactly where to find them. The hidden path. 30 minutes later, Dallin was back in his patrol car, speeding toward the woods. Toward the highway where it all began. His headlights cut through the thick darkness, illuminating the lonely stretch of asphalt. No other cars. No signs of life. Just the road, the trees, and the weight of something unseen pressing down on him. He pulled over at the exact spot where he had stopped for the Bear family. The air felt different. Charged. Like reality itself was stretched thin here. Dallin stepped out, flashlight in hand, scanning the tree line. Then, a whisper. Not in his ears. In his mind. You see now, don't you? Dallin spun, heart pounding. The voice had no direction, no source. But he wasn't alone. A figure emerged from the trees. Not like before, not flickering, not a glitch in reality. This one was solid. Tangible. And it wasn't human. The shape was humanoid, but not quite right. The proportions were too perfect, too precise. Its eyes, deep, liquid black, held knowledge far beyond anything Dallin could comprehend. Yet, strangely, he didn't feel fear. You should not have interfered, it said. Dallin's grip tightened on his flashlight. Who are you? The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand. The space around Dallin shimmered. And suddenly, the world changed. The other side, the trees around him flickered, like a mirage dissolving. Dallin gasped. He wasn't in the woods anymore. He was, somewhere else. The sky above wasn't the night sky, it was a kaleidoscope of shifting colors, shapes bending in ways his mind couldn't fully grasp. The ground beneath him felt soft, fluid, yet solid all at once. And in the distance, a city. Not a human city. Not a place made of steel and glass. A place built by something ancient. Something hidden. This is what you were never meant to see, the figure said beside him. Dallin turned, eyes wide. Where are we? Not where. Between. Between what? Between your world, and theirs. Dallin's pulse pounded. The bears. They're from here, aren't they? The figure nodded. They are not what you call bears. They are older than your species. Older than your world. They have hidden for eons, watching, waiting. For what? The figure turned toward him. To see if your kind is worth saving. A chill ran through Dallin's spine. Saving from what? The figure didn't answer. Instead, it gestured toward the city. And as Dallin looked closer, he saw them. Shapes. Beings. Moving within the strange structures, their forms flickering between familiar and impossible. You have seen them before, the figure murmured. Dallin's mind reeled. And suddenly, it all clicked. The strange time loss. The way the bears had bowed to the shadowy figure. The way he had felt watched ever since. They weren't just hiding. They were studying him. Studying humanity. And he was the first human to ever step into their world. A choice to make. Dallin's breath came fast and shallow. His mind fought to process what he was seeing, what he was hearing. Why me? He asked. The figure studied him. Because you stopped. Dallin blinked. Stopped? You saw life in danger, and you stopped. No weapon. No fear. Only kindness. The words hit deep. He thought back to that night. The bears. The road. The moment he chose to stop his car instead of driving away. Had that been a test? So, what now? He asked. The figure tilted its head. Now, you decide. Decide what? Whether your species is ready to know the truth. Dallin's chest tightened. And if I say no? Then you forget. You go back. You live your life as if none of this happened. Dallin swallowed hard. And if I say yes? The figure's black eyes reflected a universe of possibilities. Then everything changes. Dallin stood there, his heart pounding, staring out at the impossible city. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about all of humanity. And he had to make a choice. Dallin stood at the threshold of two worlds. The impossible city stretched before him, its architecture shifting, fluid-like, yet somehow solid. Strange figures moved in the distance, some barely distinguishable from shadows, others flickering between forms that hurt his eyes to look at. And beside him stood the being, the one that had brought him here. You must decide, it repeated, its deep black eyes unreadable. Dallin clenched his fists. What was he supposed to do? He had spent his whole life believing in laws, rules, a structured reality. Now he was staring at something that defied all of it. Why does my choice matter? He asked, his voice hoarse. The being tilted its head, as if amused by the question. Because you are human. So? Your kind is different. Dallin narrowed his eyes. Different how? The being exhaled, or at least, something like an exhale. Most species fear the unknown. They avoid it. Hide from it. But humans? Humans run toward it. They break the rules of nature. They push beyond what they should. That is both your strength, and your danger. Dallin swallowed hard. Danger to who? The being turned toward the city. To everything. Dallin's chest tightened. You think we're a threat? You have always been a threat, the being murmured. You just haven't realized it yet. A chill ran through Dallin's spine. What the hell was it talking about? Then why are you giving me a choice? He pressed. The being met his gaze. Because unlike others before you, you stopped. Dallin's breath caught. The highway. The bears. That one simple act, choosing to stop instead of driving away. That was a test, wasn't it? He whispered. A test. A moment. A glimpse into what your kind might become, the being confirmed. Dallin felt lightheaded. And if I had failed? The being's voice dropped lower. Then you would not be standing here now. Dallin inhaled sharply. He didn't need to ask what that meant. The ones who failed, disappeared. A dangerous truth. Dallin ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. So, this other species, the ones hiding among us. They've been here for how long? Before your ancestors stood upright, the being said simply. Dallin swallowed hard. And they've stayed hidden? This entire time? They had no choice. Dallin frowned. What do you mean? The being turned to him. Because something is coming, Officer Dallin. Something that does not ask questions. Something that will not care whether your kind is ready or not. Dallin's pulse spiked. What's coming? The being hesitated. Something that devours. A shiver ran through him. Devours? You mean, like an invasion? The being didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, it gestured toward the distant city. They have been watching. Waiting. Preparing. But they cannot stop it alone. Dallin exhaled shakily. And you think humans can? The being's gaze was unreadable. I think humans will try. And that is what makes you different. Dallin shook his head, his heart pounding. So what? You're asking me to be some kind of messenger? To go back and warn people? The being was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, it said, I am asking you to decide if humanity should know the truth. The final choice. Dallin stared at the city. At the shadows moving within it. At the ancient, hidden intelligence that had existed long before humans had ever tamed fire. And he realized, this wasn't just a choice for himself. This was a choice for all of humanity. Did he tell the world? Did he expose what he had seen, what he had learned? Or did he walk away? Pretend none of this happened? He thought about the bears on the road. How they had moved with purpose. How they had recognized the figure. How they had bowed. They knew. They had always known. And now, so did he. If I say yes, Dallin asked slowly. If I choose to reveal the truth, what happens next? The being was silent. Then, in a voice softer than before, it said, then everything changes. Dallin exhaled sharply. He had made his decision. And there was no going back. Dallin stood at the threshold between two worlds. The ancient city stretched before him, shifting in ways his mind could barely comprehend. The air here was thicker, heavier, charged with an energy that didn't belong to Earth. A place hidden in the gaps of reality itself. The being beside him watched silently, patiently. If I say yes, Dallin repeated, his voice hoarse, then what? The being finally spoke. Then you carry a burden no human has ever carried before. Dallin exhaled. He had spent his life making split-second choices, but this? This wasn't a traffic stop. This wasn't writing a ticket or responding to a disturbance. This was about humanity's future. His future. And the choice felt too big for one man to make. Why me? He asked. The being tilted its head. Because you chose kindness when no one was watching. A silence stretched between them. Then, suddenly, a low rumble in the distance. Dallin turned toward the city. And he saw them. Figures. Watching. Waiting. The hidden ones. The creatures who had lived alongside humanity for thousands, maybe millions, of years, unseen, unknown. They weren't stepping forward, weren't speaking, but their presence was palpable. They were waiting for his answer. Dallin's chest tightened. He turned back to the being. And if I say no? Then you forget. You go home. You live your life in peace, never knowing what you saw was real. Dallin's mind raced. He thought about the symbol. The strange time loss. The bear family that wasn't really a bear family. And the warning. Something is coming, he whispered. The being nodded. Yes. And your kind will have to face it, whether you are ready or not. Dallin clenched his fists. And these, hidden ones? Will they fight? They are not warriors. They are watchers. They will not interfere unless your kind proves itself worthy. Proves itself worthy. Dallin's pulse pounded. He looked back at the city one last time. Then he closed his eyes. And he made his choice. Back on Earth, Dallin gasped, his lungs burned as if he had been holding his breath for hours. He wasn't in the hidden city anymore. He was back on the road. The same stretch of highway where it all began. His squad car sat idling, hazard lights blinking. His body cam was still running. His hands trembled against the steering wheel. For a moment, he thought, had it all been a dream? Then he checked his phone. One new message. It is done. His heart slammed against his ribs. He had chosen. But he didn't know what the consequences would be. The world reacts. The next morning, everything changed. News reports exploded across the world, strange glitches in government satellites, corrupted surveillance footage across multiple cities, strange symbols appearing in forests and deserts. The same symbol Dallin had seen on his body cam. People began whispering. Something was happening. Something big. And deep down, Dallin knew, this was just the beginning. The world was waking up. And something was coming. Dallin stood in front of his bathroom mirror, staring at his own reflection. His eyes were different. Not physically, no color change, no visible marks. But there was something behind them now. Something that hadn't been there before. He had seen too much. And he had chosen. The world outside was changing. The news was filled with strange phenomena, glitches in live broadcasts, unexplained animal behavior, symbols appearing in random locations. People were noticing, asking questions. But the answers? He was the only one who had them. His phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. You are not alone. Dallin exhaled. He knew they were watching him now. But the real question was, who else was? The real test begins. He sat in his patrol car, parked outside the precinct, scrolling through forums, news articles, and classified reports leaked online. He wasn't the only one seeing this. Scientists, journalists, even regular people, something was shifting. Some believed it was an elaborate hoax. Some believed it was government interference. And a few? A few were starting to suspect the truth. Dallin's radio crackled. Dispatch to all units, reports of unidentified aerial activity near Highway 14. Requesting available officers. Dallin's stomach twisted. That was the same highway where it all began. He grabbed the radio. This is Dallin. I'm on it. He turned on his sirens and peeled out of the parking lot. The final sign. By the time he arrived at the location, several cars had already pulled over on the side of the road. People were outside their vehicles, staring up. Dallin followed their gaze, and his breath caught in his throat. The sky was wrong. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a drone. It was something else. A ripple in the air. A bending of space. A glimpse of something just beyond the edge of reality, like the hidden city he had seen, but this time, it wasn't contained. It was bleeding through. Someone gasped. A child pointed. Mommy, look! The animals are watching. Dallin turned, and froze. Lined up along the edge of the forest were bears, deer, wolves, even birds perched on branches. All of them, staring in complete silence. Not afraid. Not running. Just watching. A man pulled out his phone to record, but his camera glitched. Dallin's hand hovered over his own body cam. He knew what would happen if he tried to record it. Some things weren't meant to be captured. Some things had to be seen. The ripple in the sky shifted. And for a fraction of a second, Dallin saw something standing inside of it. Not the flickering figure from before. Not the beings from the hidden city. This was something else. And it was coming. Dallin's breath hitched. The air pulsed. The ripple vanished. The animals blinked, then simply walked away. Just like that, the moment was over. The world returned to normal. Except, it wasn't normal anymore. And Dallin knew it never would be again. The life lesson. That night, Dallin sat on his porch, watching the stars. He knew now, he wasn't just an officer anymore. He was a witness. A guardian of a truth too big for the world to handle. And somewhere out there, hidden just beneath the surface of reality, something ancient was waiting. Waiting to see if humanity was ready. Waiting to see if Dallin's choice had been the right one. For now, the world slept in ignorance. But one day, the real test would come. And when it did, humanity would have to face it. Alone. Dallin exhaled, a small, knowing smile on his lips. Let's see what happens next.